At 60 years old, after walking through some of the darkest corners a man can face, I've come to realize the greatest mistake a decent man can make is turning his own back into a floor for others to walk on. When you bend down for too long to carry an entire family, they stop seeing your sacrifice. To them, you simply become the architecture beneath their feet. And then, they will stand tall on your bleeding spine, look down at your 9-year-old daughter, insult her as a mistake, and then turn around and tell you to just shut up and finish the fried chicken on your plate. That night, in that house on Glenmore Avenue, I made a choice. There were no shouts, no clenched fists, no loud curses, just the heavy silence of a man who had finally reached his limit. Stay with me, because this story isn't just about a fractured family. It's a lesson in how a father reclaims justice for his child with the most powerful weapon of all, a quiet retreat. Every home has shadows that outsiders never see. If you are here searching for the true value of self-respect and family, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Let us turn the pages of this memory together. In 1996, I was 39 years old. I lived in Riverside, a working-class neighborhood in Savannah. There was nothing fancy about it, just rows of modest houses where the winter snow piled all the way up to the porches. But it was quiet. I worked 12 hours a day at the Riverport shipyard, a place where the freezing northern winds could go right through you and numb you to the bone. I worked day and night for one single reason. Clara Grace Torres, my 9-year-old daughter. Clara's mother, Josephine, and I had separated after 3 years together. We didn't scream, and we didn't drag each other through courts to feed greedy lawyers. We sat down like adults and split the responsibility because a child deserved better than her parents' shortcomings. Clara lived with her mother in the next town over, but every Wednesday evening and every other weekend, she belonged to me. I guarded those days like they were solid gold bars in my wallet. We had our little rituals, eating pancakes on Saturday mornings at the old diner on Linden Avenue, walking by the riverbank to watch the migrating birds, and rewatching a cartoon she already knew by heart, line for line. But I had another family. The Torres family had been rooted in this area for 3 generations. Ever since my father passed away when I was 24, my mother Sophia's house on Glenmore Avenue became the only anchor holding everyone together. On the second Sunday of every month, everyone had to come back. That was Mother's law. She would spend all of Saturday seasoning chicken, mashing potatoes, simmering gravy, and baking cornbread and collard greens. That house always carried the smell of warm frying oil and butter, the very scent that raised me and my younger sister, Bianca. Bianca was 8 years younger than me. She was sharp, attractive, and knew exactly how to make herself the center of attention within the first 15 minutes of walking into a room. But Bianca also carried a toxic belief. She truly thought the world, and especially I, owed her a life of luxury. Her selfishness wasn't loud. She didn't steal, and she didn't curse. She was selfish in the casual way she accepted every bit of help as if it were a natural obligation, always finding a way to blame her circumstances when things didn't go her way. For years, I let it slide because I kept telling myself, she's my sister. Our father died early, and it's my duty to look after her. My Clara loved those Sunday dinners with all her heart. She was a deeply sensitive and gentle child. Every single time she walked into her grandmother's house, her very first instinct was to dash straight into the kitchen, stand on her tippets, and sneak a small dollop of mashed potatoes right off her grandma's wooden spoon, giggling softly. At that long dining table, she always sat right by my right hand, using those big, quiet brown eyes to observe the world of adults without missing a single thing. But that particular Sunday dinner in September was nothing like the others. Bianca showed up with Julian, a stockbroker from Chicago she had only been seeing for about 2 months. He wore an expensive suit and polished leather shoes that felt entirely alien to our worn-out, modest dining room. The moment she walked in, Bianca noticed Clara sitting in the chair next to mine, my daughter's familiar, everyday spot. Without a single word of greeting to the child, Bianca marched over, tapped her blood-red fingernails sharply onto the wooden tabletop, and spoke in a voice as cold as ice. "Clara, get up and go sit on the extra chair in the corner of the room. This spot is for Julian. He isn't used to sitting in the shadows. Clara looked at me, a brief flash of fear and utter confusion washing over her eyes. I opened my mouth to speak, to stop it right there, but my mother stepped out from the kitchen. Seeing Julian, she immediately put on a welcoming smile and gave me a quiet, pleading look to keep the peace. Clara, possessing the pure grace and tolerance that only a 9-year-old child could have, automatically picked up her small plate and quietly retreated to the corner table, right beside the old buffet cabinet. Bianca sat down casually, laughing and flirting with Julian, as if she had just cleared away a stray toy blocking her path. I swallowed my rage, my hand gripping my fork so hard beneath the table that my knuckles turned white. At that moment, I did not know that my compliance would only feed my sister's cruelty. The breaking point came when I stepped into the kitchen to grab more gravy for my mother. When I walked back out, the entire atmosphere in the dining room had shifted. It wasn't absolute silence, but rather a low, heavy hush, thick with collective guilt. Uncle Gary had suddenly turned to Julian, asking him about the stock market in a voice far too loud. His wife, Linda, kept her eyes glued to her plate, refusing to look up. I looked toward the corner table. Clara was gone. Her plate was still there, carrying half-eaten cornbread, and her fork lay forgotten on the hardwood floor. I glanced over at Bianca. She was leaning in close, whispering something into Julian's ear, and both of them let out a low smirk. A cold chill raced straight down my spine. I set the gravy boat down on the table, asked no questions, and walked straight toward the hallway leading to the bathroom. Through the cracked door, I saw my daughter. Clara was sitting on the edge of the cold porcelain bathtub, her knees pulled tightly to her chest, her small shoulders shaking violently. She was weeping, but she wasn't making a sound. She was biting down hard on her purple sweater, desperately trying to swallow her own sobs so no one would hear her. It felt as though an invisible hand had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart to pieces. I pushed the door open, knelt on the freezing tile floor, and gently took her small, trembling feet into my hands. "Clara, look at me. What's wrong, baby?" She looked up, tears streaming heavily down her round cheeks. "Daddy, Aunt Bianca said I shouldn't be at these family dinners. She told Uncle Julian that I am a stray child, a mistake born from your and Mommy's mistakes. She said because I'm here, the whole Torres family in Savannah is being laughed at." "Daddy, what does a stray child mean? Is it my fault that Grandma and Aunt Bianca are ashamed?" Do you know what that feels like? Do you know the weight of being a father and listening to your 9-year-old girl, a gentle soul who wouldn't dare hurt an aunt, asking you if her very existence is a sin? In that exact moment, the world around me shattered into 1,000 pieces. I wiped the tears from Clara's face and helped her stand up straight. I looked directly into those brown eyes and spoke every word slowly, carving them into her mind so she would never forget. "Clara Grace, look at me. You are the best thing, the most beautiful creation that has ever walked into my life. You are not a mistake. You are the entire reason I exist on this earth. Do you understand me? The entire reason," she nodded, her lower lip still trembling. I told her to wait for me in the hallway. I walked back into the dining room. 7 adults were sitting there, plates of fried chicken still steaming, but Uncle Gary's forced laughter died the moment he saw my face. I walked to the end of the table, standing right across from Bianca and Julian. My voice was entirely calm, the terrifying kind of calm that comes right before a storm breaks. "Bianca, what exactly did you just say to Clara in the corner?" Bianca looked up, rolling her eyes with deep annoyance. She set her glass down on the table with a dull, hollow thud, folded her arms, and looked at me with pure defiance. "I just told her the truth, Mateo. You and Josephine never got married. You had a kid, and then you broke up. She's a child born out of wedlock, and that's just a fact in this town. I brought Julian here tonight, and I don't want our family looking messy in front of outsiders. Why are you making such a huge deal out of this? She's 9 years old. She doesn't know what she's crying about. She'll be fine." Julian let out a quiet smirk, casually adjusting the collar of his suit jacket. I turned my eyes to my mother, the woman I had quietly taken care of and supported for 15 years. She looked at me with pleading eyes, but the words that came out of her mouth were, "Mateo, let it go, son. We have a guest here today. We can close the door and talk about this later. Eat your chicken. It's getting cold. Uncle Gary clicked his tongue and shook his head. She's your sister, Mateo. She's just blunt. She didn't mean any harm. Come on, sit down and have a beer. Not a single person stood up for my daughter. Not a single person walked into that hallway to comfort a 9-year-old girl who was weeping in the dark. To them, Bianca's pride in front of a wealthy stranger mattered more than the soul of my child. They wanted me to swallow my own dignity, eat my chicken, and keep playing the role of the big, forgiving brother. I stood up straight, buttoned my jacket, and walked back into the hallway to take Clara's freezing hand. Mom, I'm leaving. I'll call you later. We walked out the front door, leaving behind the muffled sound of Bianca shouting after us. Just let him go! He's always been selfish, acting like he's the only man who knows how to be a father. There are betrayals that do not come from your enemies, but from the very people who sit across from you at the dinner table. If you have ever felt that kind of isolation from your own flesh and blood, leave a simple period in the comments below. But do not turn away just yet, because the story does not end here. The next part is where the numbers begin to speak. When I brought Clara back to her mother's house, Josephine took one look at her swollen, puffy eyes and understood everything. She didn't blame me. She just pulled Clara into a quiet hug and looked at me with an aching sorrow in her eyes. I drove back to my empty house in Riverside at midnight. Sitting at my kitchen table under a dim, flickering bulb, I opened that yellow legal pad. When you are the one who carries everything, you become invisible. People forget that the very floor they are standing on is being held up by your spine and your sweat, earned under the freezing hull of a shipyard. They think money just drops from heaven into their wallets. I picked up my pen and began to list the numbers that my father, before he passed, told me a man should never boast about. But tonight, I am going to count them. The first item, Bianca's apartment on Brown Street near the Oregon District, $1,400 a month. Because her credit history was a disaster, I was the primary financial guarantor, quietly covering $900 of it monthly for over 3 years just to keep her from being thrown out on the street. That is $32,400. The second item, the brand new Honda Accord she drives around town to show off to Julian. I was the one who went to the dealership on Wilmington Pike and paid off $14,000 of the remaining principal loan so the bank wouldn't repossess her car. Her auto insurance? Carried right under my own policy. Paid by me every single month for 2 years. The third item, her management certification tuition at the University of Dayton, $6,800, paid by me in full, in cash, without missing a dime. She thanked me once with a text message and a thumbs-up emoji. Then there were the unlisted things. The $3,500 MacBook when she complained her old laptop was broken, $600 for her birthday trip to Nashville, $340 for an urgent care medical bill in the middle of the night because she texted me in a panic. And finally, $900 directly transferred to my mother on the first of every single month for her living expenses. Because since my father died, I watched her clip coupons just to buy basic groceries. They used my money to fund a glamorous life, to bring tailored suit boyfriends into our family home to humiliate my daughter, and then they called me selfish. All right then. On Tuesday morning, I took 2 hours of leave from the shipyard. I made 3 phone calls. The first call was to the property management company handling Bianca's building. I requested to be removed from the lease guarantee by the end of the billing cycle, as permitted under my agreement. They said they would send an urgent notice to Bianca. I told them, go ahead. The second call was to the insurance provider. Remove Bianca Torres from the family auto policy. The third was a brief email to the bursar's office at the University of Dayton, notifying them that I would terminate the tuition funding arrangement for the upcoming term. I didn't say a single angry word to my family. I simply stopped spending my hard-earned money on people who didn't respect my daughter. The silence lasted exactly 11 days. On the 11th day, a freezing Thursday afternoon, I was standing on the sidelines watching Clara's soccer practice. She was out on the field in her red jersey, running wildly across the frost-covered grass. The phone in my coat pocket vibrated aggressively. It was Bianca. The moment I answered, her voice shattered into 3 distinct layers of emotion: panic, anger, and utter confusion. "Mateo, are you out of your mind? My landlord just sent me a final notice," he says. "If I don't find a new financial guarantor or pay an increased 3-month deposit by the end of the week, they are going to evict me and throw my things on the street. What did you do?" I watched Clara steal the ball from a much larger kid, a bright grin breaking across her face. I smiled back, then answered the phone in a flat, even tone. "I didn't do anything, Bianca. I just updated my personal financial arrangements." She screamed into the receiver, the sound of the wind rushing on her end sounding desperate. "You're punishing me, aren't you? Just because of a conversation at dinner, you're willing to ruin your own sister's life? Are you even human? Do you have any idea that Julian is right here with me?" I cut her off, my voice dropping low, as cold as the ice on the Mississippi River. "Bianca, listen to me carefully. You insulted my 9-year-old daughter, calling her a mistake in front of a stranger. And when I confronted you, you told me I was being dramatic, and the whole dinner table agreed with you. So I decided to take everyone's advice. I stopped making a big deal out of things. I stopped reacting entirely. I just stopped being the floor for you to step on. If your wealthy Julian is right there with you, tell him to sign your lease guarantee. Don't call me again." I hung up. 3 days later, Uncle Gary called, the booming laughter completely gone from his voice. "Mateo, buddy, I heard from your mom that Bianca is about to lose her place. I know she was wrong, but isn't cutting her off like this a bit too ruthless?" I asked him back. "Uncle Gary, do you know how much rent I've paid for her over the last 3 years? $32,000. Did you know I paid off $14,000 of her car loan? When she humiliated Clara, you said she was just being blunt. So now I am being blunt too. I don't feed a snake in my house just to let it bite my daughter." Uncle Gary went dead silent for 10 seconds, then let out a heavy sigh. "I truly had no idea you were carrying that much weight, son. I am sorry." 3 weeks after that fateful Sunday dinner, on a cold Wednesday evening in October, the doorbell rang at my house in Riverside. I opened it, and Bianca was standing there. The haughty woman from Brown Street was gone. There was no Julian, and no bold red lipstick. Her hair was pulled back hastily, and her hollow eyes carried the deep exhaustion of someone facing the harsh reality of self-reliance for the very first time in her life. She looked at me, her voice hoarse and quiet. "I didn't come here to ask for money, Mateo. I just wanted to see Clara." I quietly stepped aside and let her come inside. Clara was sitting at the kitchen table, working on a diagram of the water cycle. When she noticed Bianca, her little body went stiff for a fraction of a second, the automatic defense reflex of a child who had been deeply hurt. But then, Clara did something I never could have expected. She stood up, walked over to her school backpack hanging by the door, rummaged through it for a moment, and pulled out a piece of paper folded into 4 sections. She walked straight up to Bianca and held it out. Bianca's hand shook as she took the paper and unfolded it. I moved up behind her, looking over her shoulder. It was written in my daughter's slightly uneven, 2 large block letters, some parts in pencil and others in purple marker. In the corner of the page, she had drawn her signature little son. The letter read, "Dear Aunt Bianca, my dad told me I am not a mistake. He said I am the whole reason he is on this earth, and that I should never forget that." I went to the town library to look up what out of wedlock meant in the dictionary. I was very sad, and I cried a lot in Grandma's bathroom. I am writing this to tell you that I forgive you, because my dad teaches me that only strong people know how to forgive when they are hurt. I decided to tell you because I think you should know how much you hurt my feelings. I am not embarrassed of our family. Clara Grace Torres. P.S. I drew a sun for you so you won't be cold. The kitchen fell completely dead silent. The only sound was the fragile rustling of that paper shaking in Bianca's fingers. And then, my sharp, self-absorbed sister, the one who had held her chin high and told me I was being dramatic, completely collapsed into one of my wooden chairs. She buried her face in her rough, unmanicured hands and sobbed bitterly. It wasn't a performance to gain sympathy or ask for money. It was the ugly, broken weeping of a selfish soul whose thick walls had just been shattered by the pure innocence of a child. Clara watched her for a moment, then walked over, patted Bianca twice on the shoulder with a quiet, businesslike maturity, and went right back to her table to color in a drawing of a cloud. Bianca stayed at my table until nearly 9 o'clock that night. For the first time in 15 years, she spoke with the voice of a little sister, not a demanding creditor. She talked about her buried fear when our father died, and how watching me handle everything turned into a twisted, bitter jealousy because she felt entirely useless. A jealousy that grew into a monster she never learned to control. I didn't write her another check. I didn't call the property managers to put my name back on her lease. I looked at her and said calmly, "I accept this apology, Bianca. But you still have to move out. You have to pay for your own car, and you have to cover your own tuition. The hardship you are feeling right now isn't my punishment. It is your consequence. You need to sit with it long enough to understand the true weight of your words." She glanced over at Clara and whispered softly, "She is a real angel, Mateo." I looked at my daughter and replied, "Yes, she is." And she didn't learn that from the people who called her a mistake. A man's life is not measured by the amount of money he brings in, but by the safety and peace of the people who stand protected behind his back. My choice to step away from carrying the financial weight of my family was never about a lack of love. It was because I finally realized a hard truth. If you never allow people to feel the raw cost of what they break, they will never truly learn how to respect what holds them together. The Sunday dinners at the Torres home returned that January. It was no longer filled with the loud, superficial noise of the past. It was quieter now, and far more honest. Bianca had moved into a much smaller apartment, taking up part-time shifts at a local bakery to cover her own rent. She was finally learning to look outward at the interests of her niece, rather than keeping her eyes entirely on herself. The process of true healing never moves with the quick pace of a Hollywood movie. Sometimes, it simply begins with a polite, quiet thank you from a 9-year-old child to the person who once broke her heart. But for me, that is more than enough. My Clara ended up scoring a 97 on her water cycle exam. She was a little disappointed about losing those 3 points, but I looked at her and told her it was absolutely perfect. She is, and will always be, my entire reason. Thank you for sitting down here with me by the banks of the Savannah River, and for listening to an old memory. If my story helped you see the true worth of setting firm boundaries within a family, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment sharing the town or city you are listening from tonight. I wish you and your loved ones a beautiful, peaceful night, and I will see you on our next journey together.